Hey, fourth graders, so we are moving on to decimals. Now, when we think about decimals, we want to think about them just like we think about fractions. Fractions represent part of a whole. Decimals also represent part of a whole. So really, a decimal is just a different way to write a fraction. All right, now when it comes to decimals, we have a couple of place values that we want to keep in mind. So I'm going to write a number. All right. I'm going to write a number, and this number we can see has a decimal. Now you may be thinking that looks a lot like $4.53, and I'm glad that you think that, because when we think about decimals and money, that makes decimals a little bit easier. All right, this decimal point separates the wholes, the whole dollars, right, from the parts, from the change, or from the parts of a dollar, right? If we have 100 here, we would have one whole dollar. Well, if we have 100 here in the decimal, we would have one whole. Okay, so this right here is the ones place, or the whole, and I'm going to write that there because sometimes you see the word whole represented when we're talking about wholes and parts. Right here, this number, the 5, is in the tenths place. Now notice that THS at the end. That's important. It's not the tens place, it's the tenths place. Ooh, you know what, Mrs. Long? I remember when we were learning about fractions, there's a 1/10. Ah, so this tenths place is related to the 1/10 fraction. If I have 5 here, I would have 5 as my numerator. All right, so that's kind of an easy way to remember it. The other way I like to think about this, remember where I talked about money, is this is kind of like dimes. All right, this is kind of like dimes. If I have 50 cents, I have 5 dimes, right? It takes 10 dimes to make a whole, 10 dimes to make a dollar. All right, so if we kind of think about this like our dimes place, that helps us to remember dimes, tenth, okay? Because it takes 10 of them to make a whole. This is my hundredths place. All right, again, it has that THS at the end. The hundredths place, if I were representing this like a fraction, it looks like that with a 100 as the denominator. And how many of these hundredths do you think it would take to make a whole? If you said 100, you are correct. This is like our pennies, right? And it would be 3 pennies, 5 dimes. Okay, so we're not thinking about quarters and nickels because we're not worrying about that right now. Just pennies and dimes. That's all we want to think about. 10 dimes to make a dollar, tenths place. 100 pennies to make a dollar, hundredths place. Okay, so that is how I like to think about decimals. And if you think about decimals like that, it really makes it a whole lot easier. So then when you're looking in your like problems in your book, you're representing numbers, you're looking at a picture, all right? And your picture is either a tens grid or a hundreds grid. A tens grid is a box that's split into 10 spots, and I'm really bad at drawing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, oops, here, I'll split that one again, 9. All right, so I have 10 spots, and a certain amount of spots are shaded in. So like, let's say I shaded in 3 of these. All right, again, when you're thinking about this, think about what we've talked about already with fractions. The numerator tells us how many pieces are shaded in. The denominator tells us how many pieces there are total. All right, I have 3 pieces shaded in. There's 10 pieces total, so that would be 3 tenths. This is the tenths place. So if I wanted to write that as a decimal, I would have a 0, because there's no holes, and then the 3 goes in the tenths place. That's how you read decimals. You read the digit and then the place. 3 tenths, okay? So that would be one example. If I had it where I have a hundredths grid, this one's going to be even harder for me to draw. It has 100 squares. 10. And then we have 10 going this way, right? Oh, man. All right, we have 10 going this way. And again, we shade in a certain amount of them. So like, let's say I shaded in this much. All right. Well, I know each row going down is 10, right? So I don't have to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I know each row going down is 10. So I have 10, 20, 21. And how many squares are there total? 100. So there's 21 hundredths, like that. And same thing, this is like 21 cents. Okay? So when it comes to the decimals, you're just writing it, okay? Whatever you have over top of the 10 goes in the tenths place. Whatever is over top of the hundredths looks like that, looks like change, okay? It's like I have 21 pennies, or I have 21 cents. So I write it like money. I could write this with a 0 after it, but I'm not going to confuse you with that just yet, okay? So that is what you're doing with this lesson. You're simply going through and you're looking at how many are shaded in. If it's out of 10, the 10 goes in the denominator and it goes in the tenths place. If it's out of 100, a 100 goes in the denominator and it looks a lot like you're writing money, okay? Because there's 100 pennies in a dollar, okay? So use that. That's going to help you out with this lesson, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.